Hello and welcome to you all. I'm Gonzalo Lira and this is the Roundtable. And today I'm joined by three remarkable guests. And I think it's going to be a hell of a lot of fun this show today. So before I get going, please hit me with a +1 if you can hear me properly and if the video image is all right. I'd appreciate it. And let me just dive right in and introduce my guests. First off is Alex Christoforou, of course, the better half of the Duran. Alex is a good friend of mine, and it's a delight to have him on the show. Alex, good to see you.
Thank you for having me on, Gonzalo. Good to be here.
Yeah, it's great. Then there's Pepe Escobar, who is a fantastic writer about the Eurasian situation. He's been writing for a couple of decades now on the whole Eurasian situation. And right now he's in Istanbul, 3 decades. Okay, Pepe, it's a pleasure having you on.
It's a pleasure to be with you guys, and it's a pleasure to be with the audience. Okay, I want questions from the audience. That would be really cool.
Absolutely. And finally, last but not least, there's iEarlGrey. Mike, it's a pleasure to meet you finally because we have so many people in common, and we just never gotten around to shooting the breeze together. And it's a delight to have you on, man. Thanks for being here.
Honor and a privilege. Thank you, Gonzalo.
Well, my pleasure. So you guys, Mike from iEarlGrey, and I'm going to call iEarlGrey Mike from now on because that's his name. Mike and Pepe were talking about something while I was doing like tech stuff. What the hell were you guys talking about? Because it sounded really interesting.
So if I'll give Pepe my thought process, Pepe wrote this brilliant article following the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum. And Pepe mentioned, I think Alex also flagged in one of his videos about these transport corridors, trade corridors. So I was asking Pepe if he'd be willing to expand a bit more, particularly for those watching who either didn't come across his article or didn't catch mine or Alex's reference to it. Because I think that actually Pepe's hit on something that I foresee as either being a key issue in the future or indeed something that is very much in the background. So I'll let Pepe take it away.
Oh my God. How many hours do we have?
Well, if we think of Iran, I mean, just one trade route was through Iran, wasn't it? And we're thinking about India being a big trade partner. So yeah,
yes,
we'll focus on that one.
Because basically this is myself and others. It's something we've been developing for the past at least 8 years in what we write and what we follow in our travels. It started even before the new Silk Roads being announced officially in 2013, first in Nur Sultan and then in Jakarta. The official roadmap of the Belt and Road, which, as you all know, used to be called OBOR, one belt, one road, but it could never translate into English or in any other language for that matter. So then they came up with something as abstruse as OBOR, which is BRI, Belt and Road Initiative. So as you know, the Chinese are not exactly well versed into soft power denominations or terminology. No? If it sounds great in Mandarin, they automatically translate it. But this is something that we try to explain to them. It doesn't work like this. But anyway, officially, the Belt and Road in 2013 had 6 corridors, including the Maritime Silk Road. And one of these corridors is extremely important because it goes through Russia. It's the Northern Corridor that goes through the Trans-Siberian. There's another corridor that links to Russia that goes through Kazakhstan. I've been to this border, which is one of the most fantastic borders on earth, which is the border between Xinjiang and Kazakhstan. And you have 3 different borders, in fact. You have one for cargo, with a super highway on the Kazakh side. You have one for trains that come from Xinjiang, cross Kazakhstan, and then keep going through Kazakhstan, and then merge with the Trans-Siberia later on. And one for passengers, which is that's the most fascinating one. You have buses coming from Kazakhstan and from other parts in Central Asia. They get to a parking lot. Everybody crosses ultra high-tech border where they get stamped less than 24-hour visa, basically a 12-hour visa. They step into another bus and they are taken to a gigantic mall where they shop till they drop until 5 p.m. and then they come back and they go back to their places in Kazakhstan and other parts of Central Asia. So it's absolutely fascinating. So 3 borders. This is Korgos. And this is supposed to be one of the key nodes of the new Silk Roads, because in the Chinese vision, it's one of the key links between Xinjiang and Central Asia. Okay, it's developing slowly but surely. I would say that perhaps by the end of this decade, they'll start building high-speed rail, and then the whole thing will be fundamentally more sophisticated, right? But when you look at the train and cargo transit between Xinjiang and Kazakhstan, it's already very significant. Trans-Siberian, we all know that. Trans-Siberian was built over a century ago. It's a very complicated trip. I did it twice, actually, in the old days. And it's still a mess because you have to change settings at the Chinese-Russian border. It takes 6 days, 7 days and 6 nights to go from Beijing to Moscow. It's slow. Sometimes it's 40 kilometers, 30 kilometers an hour, etc. So they need high-speed rail. It will be built probably by the end of this decade, beginning of the next one. Like the Chinese are building Moscow-Kazan. So Chinese companies mixed with Russian companies probably will end up building the whole high-speed rail Trans-Siberian, which is something that, yes, go ahead, Gonzalo.
No, what I was saying is that the whole Belt and Road Initiative, it is, as I understand it, it was really an initiative by the Chinese because they realized
by the
that
Ministry of Commerce, to be more exact, Gonzalo.
But the Chinese rather were extremely concerned about the Chinese. The Chinese were extremely concerned that the Americans would blockade their trade, and that
not at the beginning.
Well,
Gonzalo, not at the beginning. When Trump came to power, yes, but when they devised the big picture, which is was a fascinating process because it started with the Ministry of Commerce, and then they got everybody else involved, all the major think tanks. So they had draft after draft. So when they had the final paper that landed on Xi Jinping's desk, this is what he. In the end, everything was okay. All the details. This is it. This is the overall strategy. These are the corridors, and this is what we plan to accomplish in the next 25 years at least. And this is what Xi Jinping signed, and it became the overarching foreign policy concept for everything that China does. For now and for the foreseeable future.
Doesn't it seem to? I mean, from an outsider's perspective, it looks as if it's designed to prevent the ruination of Chinese trade if the Americans decide to blockade China.
But the blocking. I'll let you know what Chinese think tanks or the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences in Beijing, this is how they see an American blockade. It's the famous escape from Malacca.
Right.
For them, it's going to be a maritime blockade, not a heartland overland blockade. And that's the key for the Belt and Road having at least 5 overland corridors.
Yeah, exactly.
The maritime Silk Road, you see, because they say, no, overland, if we organize our new turbocharged relationship with our Central Asian neighbors, with Southeast Asia, which is for them is a super cool deal because the ASEAN 10, the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, their number one partner, all of them is China. So for China is already a done deal. The problem is South Asia, because then we have India, Pakistan, Bangladesh. And with South Asia, I would say it's 50% of the problem, because they have the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, CPEC, and they solved more or less the South Asian problem, building this. It's already being built. This corridor that goes from Kashgar across the Karakoram Highway, Islamabad, and then across Balochistan, all the way to Gwadar, the port in the Indian Ocean. And when you look at what they already did in the north, for instance, when I went there 3 years ago or so, I wanted to go to Gwadar as well. I couldn't get a permit as a foreign journalist. They said, it's too dangerous. We only give these permits like once a year. It's very complicated. If something happens or they kidnap you and all that, it's a major mess. And then, you know what happened a few months ago, no? There was an attack against Chinese, but this attack was not in Gwadar, was in Karachi. But they were focusing on Chinese engineers, you know, Chinese help, etc. So they could focus on other foreign visitors, such as journalists as well. But when you look at what they did at the Karakoram Highway in the north, it's absolutely unbelievable. I remember the old Karakoram Highway, which was an adventure to travel from Gilgit in the northern areas all the way to the Chinese border. And now you have an American-style highway, absolutely out of sight, you know, with magnificent tunnels, including a tunnel that they cut through the mountain. So one of those lakes wouldn't keep flooding the Karakoram, which is a problem that they had every rainy season. And it's absolutely amazing. Fiber optics, you know. So when you look at what they did in the northern Karakoram, it's very easy to see what they're going to do in the rest of the Karakoram, all the way to Gwadar, and the way they are building Gwadar little by little. And Gwadar could become, in the next few years, a mini Dubai. Not at the moment, because of the, and then we have to talk about the Balochistan liberation movement, and then we need another 10 hours.
Yeah, well, right now at the moment, the big problem insofar as China is concerned is Nancy Pelosi seems to be going there to start, I don't know what. Alex, I want to bring you into this conversation. You know, what do you make of Pelosi going to Taiwan? And I do believe that she's going to be landing on the anniversary of the founding of the People's Liberation Army, which is
it confirmed? Has that been official? Is it official now? Or
no, it's not confirmed. It's not confirmed because some of those
but let's have
cycles of the Sullivan Blinken Congo. They're trying to block it.
Yeah, it hasn't.
They know what it means.
Yeah, it hasn't been quite confirmed. But before we talk about Pelosi, I just have one quick question that I want to throw at all of you guys, but specifically to Pepe, but Gonzalo, Mike, if you guys jump in as well. Would you guys say that the promise of One Belt, One Road, the big promise, was from Vladivostok to Lisbon? Wasn't that the big promise of One Belt, One Road from a marketing perspective? And has that not been broken successfully by the United States with this conflict in Ukraine and moving Europe away from Russia and the East, which I think Europe is going to be detached from Russia and the East, I think, for decades. I think we were talking about this, Gonzalo, some time ago, where we said, you know, Europe and Russia aren't going to get back together for a long time. I think so wasn't the big promise Lisbon to Vladivostok? That's
what I thought so too. But I think that Mike would be the perfect person to ask. I mean, since you're in St. Petersburg, Mike, as to whether the divorce between Europe and Russia is permanent. Please tell us.
Permanent.
Well,
that's difficult. Permanent's a bit too strong. For the foreseeable future, I see little to no desire from Russians, both the people and the political rhetoric that I read in the Duma and from Medvedev, Lavrov, etc. It's really serious. I'm trying to formulate how to put this in there, because
I heard that Anatoly Levin was really surprised how the Russian intelligentsia has really turned against Europe because of this thing. And is that accurate?
I believe so, yeah. And I was speaking to Alexander Mercouris about this, especially in the academic series. I'm really struggling to convey the extent of the U-turn as was before, as this truth of Putin's words that he said for years, these attitudes, and then people seeing it in the flesh, the Russophobia and the extreme levels of it that are being experienced by particularly Russian truckers, as they go through Poland and stuff, every trip, they're getting hounded and pushed off the road and things like this. So when you add all that together, there is an extremely strong feeling. First of all, we don't want to deal with them, but also like the lifting of a burden in a way. Oh, good, we don't have to worry about pleasing those people because they can never be pleased in the West. That's where I feel that uplifting is.
So you think that to square this with Alex's question, that the divorce between Europe and Russia is going to be there for a good long while, right?
Yeah, I believe so, and I think as much has been said, particularly by Germany, has it not?
Mm-hmm.
The Scholz.
Okay, so
can I answer the question?
Oh.
Please.
Oh, yes, go.
No, because this is I hope it's not a very long question because all the main themes converge into the answering this question. In fact, between Europe and Russia, it depends on what silo of knowledge you're talking to in Moscow. If you talk to the Valdai Club, where mostly they're Atlanticists, I know some of them. 90% are Atlanticists. You find some Eurasianists, not of the Dugin school, but Eurasianists of the Karaganov school. And then they say, okay, the divorce for the next even few decades, it's inevitable. If you ask Karaganov, this is what he's going to tell you. And Karaganov is an extreme realist. Karaganov is probably the supreme realist in Russian foreign policy. If you talk to, or if you decode what the people at the of the Security Council are saying, especially Patrushev, he gives very few interviews, and when he talks, it's usually a bomb. Patrushev has, I would say that the next 2 months or 3 months, he gave 2 absolutely crucial interviews where he's basically saying that's it. And we don't care what the Europeans say. And we can live without them, and we made our choice. And if you look at the non-response to the letters in December that they sent to Washington and Brussels, and Putin and Lavrov saying practically every day, we want to sit down and have a dialogue with you guys. And we look at the non-response of those absolutely ridiculous cycles of the crash test dummy combo, So they already knew that there would be no response, and they already had their plan, which is, that's it. They're going to cut us off. They're going to expel us from SWIFT. The sanctions are be ultra hardcore, and our pivot to the east, which was how they conceptualized it before. When I talked to Karaganov in late 2018, he talked specifically about pivoting to the east, but that was way before the special operation. Right?
And what is Karaganov saying now?
Basically the same thing, Gonzalo. I suggest that all of you and our audience take a look at the interview he gave to the New York Times. In fact, he was interviewed by an absolute asshole who used to be a correspondent in Moscow. And when you look at the questions are editorialized and are extremely ideological. They are stupid questions, ideological questions. But Karaganov is a gentleman, and his answers are excellent. Basically, diplomatically, he's saying, fuck you. We don't care what you're doing, and we don't care about anything that you're doing. Our option is Eurasia integration. And the official denomination, as you all know, is Greater Eurasian Partnership. And Karaganov was one of the guys who actually conceptualized the Greater Eurasian Partnership. The final draft, when it landed at Putin's desk, the main writer was Karaganov. So these guys who are extremely influential in setting Russian policy, they know that the pivoting in this across Eurasia policy is for the next few decades. If like Lavrov says practically every day, if Europe wants to join us, more than welcome. Now, Lavrov is not even saying that because he knows that considering the non-leadership in Europe, especially in Germany with that traffic lights racket, and Macron, which is a fucking joke. Well, I live in Paris, so I have
He's a twink.
I'm face to face with those absolute idiots every day.
He's the twink of the Rothschilds, literally.
I know,
yeah.
Guys, you have no idea. It's a nightmare. It's when I came from Paris to Istanbul a few days ago, I felt relieved. I said, man, I'm back to civilization, finally. Living in Europe now, and I'm sure our friend iEarlGrey would agree, living in Europe now at the moment is worse than torture. First of all, because we could never have a discussion or a conversation that we are having right now in Paris, in London, in Rome. Forget it. Absolutely forget. I had to escape from a dinner in Paris the last time because I couldn't stand it anymore.
But to go to Alex's question, which is
answering Alex's question,
because Alex had a very good question. You know, the whole
it's an absolutely fabulous question because everything interacts.
Let's answer it. But the issue becomes, as far as I'm concerned, Alex, is that if Europe wants a divorce from the Eurasian continent, it's going to hurt the Europeans far more than the Eurasians, wouldn't it? What do you think, Alex?
Well, my point on this, going back to the Nancy Pelosi trip, is okay. The United States, the neocons, the deep state, they wanted regime change in Russia. They've been wanting it for a while now. They went for it in Ukraine. They got the war that they've been wanting. They're losing the war. They've essentially lost the war. We all know that where this thing is going to end up in the next 3 to 6 months, but they also know that they've lost the war in Ukraine. They've lost, to their shock, I believe, to their shock, they have lost the economic war as well. But who's going to suffer more? Europe is going to suffer more than the United States. The United States does have a chance to make it through the next 2-3 years, which are going to be very difficult. But the U.S. does have a chance. Europe it's going to be a backwater. It's toast. It's finished. So when you look at the big picture of things, the plan was regime change Russia, and then let's see if we can go after China, and let's see what we can do with China.
They will, but that's later, Alex.
That's later. I agree. I'm simplifying things a little bit, but I'm just trying to get to the Nancy Pelosi trip. But that was kind of the big picture thinking of a lot of these guys in the think tanks in DC. It didn't go as planned. But one thing that we have to kind of admit is that they did manage to break off Europe from Russia. And it started with Nord Stream 2. And even with Trump, there was the big talk about, why are you guys getting your gas via Nord Stream 2? And it carried over to the Biden administration. They finally got Nord Stream 2 off the table. And it snowballed into what we have now, where Russia and Europe are divorced, and who knows how long that'll last. 1 decade, 2, 3, who knows, forever. We understand what's going on there. But they did manage to break off Russia from Europe. And to me, that kind of means that they have managed, to a certain extent, to sink the dream of Eurasia, Vladivostok, to Lisbon, the ultimate dream of connecting, the big connection from China all the way to Russia, all the way through Greece, Italy, Spain to Portugal. I mean, that was a big deal. I mean, that was the dream, right? They did manage to break that off. And so now I believe that they're thinking, you know what? We've lost in Ukraine, but we have managed one thing, which is to keep the US in, keep Germany down, keep Russia out. The EU now in this multipolar world is going to belong to the United States, period. It's subservient to the United States no matter what. They have NATO as the muscle. Europe is not going anywhere. I see it in Greece every day. Greece has been militarized to the max, man. I mean, they are building bases. The US is here like I've never seen them before. I mean, it's really stunning to see the American military presence here in Greece. And we're not so friendly to the American military, to be quite honest. But this has been a kind of win, Gonzalo, hasn't it, for the deep state breaking off this Eurasia dream? And now they're saying, you know what? There are certain factions in DC that are saying, you know what? Let's throw Pelosi in there. She's 82. she's quirky. She's crazy. But let's balloon test her and throw her to Taiwan and see what happens. Let's see how we can
the provocations.
Let's see the
China.
Reactions. Yeah. And they're testing the water. They're trying to see. Ukraine is lost to us, but it did accomplish one thing. Should we go after China now? And I think people are debating that. I really think there's a really big discussion in the US right now. Should we go after China and just kind of create chaos in Ukraine and then, put it behind us and go after China?
It seems to me that the Mike Pompeo speech of the Three Lighthouses speech, where he said that the enemies of the United States, or the friends of the United States that the United States has to defend at all costs, are Ukraine, Israel, and Taiwan. And which I thought was just like so much bullshit, but okay. And it seems that
they actually
Taiwan,
believe it. Yeah.
What?
They actually the psychos, the Armageddon cult, they deeply believe in that.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I have no doubt about that. And my thinking is that thank God that NATO didn't really get involved in the Ukraine situation, and I don't think that they are going to get involved.
They can't, Gonzalo, because there's no NATO. Everything is decided in Washington. I've been to NATO many times. I covered NATO.
Yeah, but when I say NATO, I'm talking as a metanym for Washington.
No, they don't decide absolutely anything.
I know. I'm using it as a metanym for Washington.
And there are some. I wouldn't say enlightened because it's too much of a compliment. Let's say some realpolitik predictions at the Pentagon, and they know what entails a direct confrontation between NATO and Russia. And they know we just needed to talk to our great friend Martyanov. NATO would be obliterated in half an hour. And they know that because they gamed it. And they know that the Russians know, and they know that the Chinese know, because these were gamed everywhere. On Alex's point, it's more complicated. For the moment, it's a tactical victory, separating Europe from Russia. But it's not a strategic victory at all, on the contrary. On the contrary, because they managed, with their policy of separating Europe from what would be the Greater Eurasia Partnership and the Belt and Road at the same time, the way they see it. Coming back to that point that the war in Ukraine is also a war against the New Silk Roads. They managed to turn not only Russia and economies that are linked to Russia and Central Asia and great straits of East Asia towards China and the Eurasia connection, the Trans-Eurasian connection. And the rest of this global south. And that's the most important point, in fact. This is not about Eurasia anymore. This is about Euro, Africa, America, Asia. Because then we're going to get Chinese and Russian influence in South America, which is progressing, especially Chinese economic, vertically. In Africa, obviously, everybody knows the Chinese in Africa. In Mali, the Russians in Mali, for instance, I was discussing this morning, in fact, how the Russians are making a meal out of Mali, and also banking on the fact that the Malinese, the ruling classes and the population, they absolutely hate the French, and they don't see Russians as an imperialist power, as they don't see the Chinese as an imperialist power as well. And this congregation, which especially economic, financial, and this is something that we should discuss later on, which is BRICS Plus. We have Iran and Argentina, which are going to become full members of the BRICS. Of course, they'll be accepted as full members. It's inevitable. It's a matter of 1 year, maybe 2. But we also have Egypt, Turkey, and the Emirates want to be part of BRICS. And soon we're going to have a flood of global South nations. Nigeria, Senegal, other countries in South America will also be part of BRICS. And one of the conceptualizers of BRICS Plus, which is a Russian, by the way, a guy who is one of the consultants to the Valdai. His idea is brilliant, and his idea landed on Putin's desk as well.
What's the idea?
Yaroslav
No, not the name of the man. What's the idea?
The idea is that let's start with getting more integration inside groupings that are already on, example, ASEAN, Mercosur, and then these are going to get their influence around BRICS Plus even more solidified. That's absolutely brilliant, because this is going to happen with Mercosur, for instance. If you have Brazil, and as soon you're going to have Argentina, soon you're going to have Uruguay and Paraguay as BRICS members as well, BRICS Plus members as well.
Yeah.
Southeast Asia, if you
Paraguay are trivial, man. Come on.
Yes, I know. Well, we all been to Paraguay. We know what it's like. But look, they are part of Mercosur.
Yeah,
and they want to have global clients, which is something that if they are part of BRICS is going to be much easier.
Okay. What's going on here is that we're sort of like wandering and not focusing.
No. But Gonzalo, let's wonder a bit, because all these things are extremely important and they are interconnected.
Yes, they are interconnected, but we have bigger fish to fry than Paraguay joining the BRICS. Okay.
Mike, it's not Paraguay. I was talking about Mercosur.
Yeah, okay, or Mercosur.
But I'll give you an even better example. ASEAN. Indonesia is going to be part of BRICS Plus as well. So then you're going to have Indonesia, Thailand, Singapore eventually as well. And ASEAN is a major power bloc linked to China. And soon we're going to have an expanded BRICS Plus with lots of ASEAN countries as well. So this idea of having organizations that still exist coalescing even more, it's at the heart of the expansion of BRICS Plus. But the most important thing is the economic financial war. And that's what Putin has been saying now.
Okay, Mike, what do you think of the financial war there? Between Europe and Russia.
I was going to throw in to what Pepe said. So we've had Iran, where Putin visited, and Erdogan, of course, Turkey as well. Now, the news today is Egypt. Mm-hmm. Now, Egypt has not just...
Yeah, Lavrov went to visit there today, as I
mentioned. Today. And a lot of talk was made by, what was it? The West asked not to take pictures with Lavrov.
I heard that. Yeah. Alex, you heard that it was somebody who objected. Oh, Erdogan. They objected to the fact that Erdogan took pictures with Lavrov. I think something like that. It was ridiculous. It was like middle school bullshit.
Yeah, really, really bizarre. So Zaharov has offered to send all the pictures to the U.S. State Department for them to use. During Lavrov's meetings in Cairo to the State Department.
Yeah. So what was the upshot of that visit of Lavrov to Cairo?
Yeah, so the big thing here is Egypt has applied to join the Shanghai Cooperation Organization as well.
Right.
So, again, this leads back into China as well. Yeah, we've talked about this tactical victory of separating Europe. Not entirely, of course, because we have Orban, who's been a real pain in the backside for people. So I see a lot of this. We've just discussed all these trade routes and all this stuff, and a lot of it just now through all that we're talking about is pointing kind of towards the east and to China, where it just seems that the other countries, literally, what is it, 110 other countries who are not involved in this little playground spat, they're consolidating. They are signing agreements and trading and setting up the routes, which they have done, as Pepe's just outlined, for 25 years when we talk about the Belt and Road. So you've had these visions and all this stuff. Where's Europe going to be? Because I don't see the same preparations or investment into such visions or future cooperation. Yeah. Yes, exactly. Now we have payment systems, Union Pay, Mir now coming to Turkey. Probably across others. I'm seeing all these developments that are potentially huge. And Pepe wrote an article today about NAM 2.0. Putin's alluded to this as well, the newly aligned movement. This is what I'm seeing. And whilst like Pepe's right, you said it's a tactical victory, sure, to cut Europe off, but they are absolutely beholden to the US. What alternatives will Europe have? Russia's fine. Russia's got all these other friends.
Yeah. And so Alex, let me turn to you. What alternatives does Europe have?
It's subservient to the United States. I think that's a given.
Vassal.
It's a vassal. Yeah, it's a vassal. And Germany's been deindustrialized, or it's going through a deindustrialization. That's clear. When Germany goes, the European Union goes. And so Europe is going to be completely 100% dependent on the United States. And I think therein lies the problem that we're facing today, and the problem that we're facing with a potential conflict between the United States and China. I completely agree with Pepe. The United States knows that they can't take on Russia. NATO can't take on Russia at the moment. They know they're going to lose. They know they've lost in Ukraine. But we all know that the people in DC are not going to just let China rise to become the dominant power in what is a multipolar world. Even Tony Blair came out and said, we have got a multipolar world, everybody. Orban said it the other day, we've got a multipolar world. And he also told Europe, guys, we need to stop the sanctions, stop this economic war. The only solution to solving Ukraine is if Russia and the United States sit at the negotiating table. Orban didn't say Ukraine and Russia. He said America and Russia need to negotiate peace in Ukraine. So everyone knows we have this multipolar world, but this is the Thucydides trap, referencing Greece again. Is the United States going to allow the rising power, Eurasia, China, Russia, India, the fair world order, as Lavrov calls it, the multipolar world, whatever you want to call it, is the United States? Are the neocons, the neoliberals, are they just going to let this just slide? Perhaps. But
no, I disagree.
I'm leaning towards, you know what? We're not going to be able to take on Russia, but can we take on China? Should we try it? Is there a possibility to start something there? I'm not saying they will. I'm not saying they won't, but they're definitely poking around. And sometimes things kind of, take their own course and they escalate. We've said it many times. They're on the sanctions escalator with China now. They're on this escalator. There's no way down. The only way is up. And
they have backpedaled slightly, haven't they, though, very quietly?
They did it with Russia. I agree. They did it with Russia too, but eventually they got there. Eventually, at the end of the day, the neocons always seem to get their way. It doesn't matter what the administration is. The neocons always seem to get their way. So that's my point. I mean, we're approaching the moment of this Thucydides trap where we're going to have to see, is the world really going to shift to this multipolar model? And will the vision of China, of Russia, of India, and all of these powers and these emerging great powers, is this vision going to come through and dominate? And will Europe just remain a vassal to the United States, and that'll just kind of be the west part of the globe, and they're going to kind of do their thing? Or are we going to head to some sort of wider conflict?
Pepe, do you think that the Chinese are going to take the bait and go into a conflict?
Of course not. Come on. They have been preparing for this for, I would say, at least a decade, even before Xi Jinping. With Xi Jinping now, they are totally prepared because they identified from the beginning, even before the Trump trade war, they identified that they start even talking in think tanks about hybrid war,
right,
which was an American think tank invention. Then the Russians start using their own version, and the Chinese, they took the Rand Corporation gang and company at their words that we are being attacked by a hybrid war. They already knew that in 2017. And now it's fascinating because there was a long discussion that we had with people who know Chinese policy very well between Hong Kong and Beijing. And some of them were saying, look, she was absolutely pissed with the start of the special military operation.
Oh, really?
Myself and others, we disagreed because he knew exactly what was going to happen, because Putin told him in person at the Olympics. So he knew that he didn't know exactly when it was going to start. But when they met in the beginning of February, Putin told Xi that something was afoot. He didn't have a date yet, because the SVR was trying to ascertain when the Ukro invasion of Donbass or Blitzkrieg would take place. They had more or less 3 dates, end of February, early March, or mid-March. And when they were more or less convinced that it was going to be maybe late February, that's why in 24, 48 hours, they had the SMO on the ground. They were prepared for it, you know. And the Chinese, of course, they knew about it. But some of these people who have connections with Politburo, or they receive information from the Politburo, you know, as you know, I worked with Asia Times for 20 years. So in Asia Times, we have a lot of connections inside China and connections in Beijing as well. So even we get information from some back channels in Beijing that you don't see in the Western media at all. It's an internal Chinese matter. And it's very hard for us as foreigners to sift through the maze and say, what is this? Is this a speculation? Is this a feud? Is this an internal war? Is this the Shanghai Mafia against Xi? What is it? It's very, very complicated. But this discussion at the highest level of how are we going to support what Putin is doing, which is it's something that if you understand the Chinese mentality, you will never expect a blunt in your face support.
Sure.
The Chinese do it. It's an extremely sophisticated form of support. It's diplomatic support, of course. It's talking to their commercial partners. Look, don't interrupt your trade dealings with Russia as well, you know. And it's a Chinese way of telling the Russians, we got your back. But
yeah, the ultimate soft power.
Yeah, in a very Taoist, Confucianist, even Buddhist way, you know. It's extremely sophisticated, and of course they abhor the idea of what could be seen as an invasion of a sovereign country, but they understand the motives. Once again, if you talk to we can't as foreigners, but if you would approach one of the 7 of the Politburo and ask for his opinion directly on the special military operation, he would probably outline to you all the reasons, all the provocations, NATO expansion, the possibility of Ukrainian restarting with nuclear weapons.
Oh yeah, I mean, there's no question. There's no question that the Chinese understand the rationale and all that.
Absolutely.
And by the way, a quick parenthesis I wanted to ask you. It's been, the inference has been very clear that the Ukrainians were about to do a blitzkrieg on the Donetsk region, and that basically the Russian armed forces beat them to the punch, quite simply. You know, they were getting ready for that, and the inferential evidence is, of course, that the best troops and the majority of the Ukrainian armed forces were in the Donbass region. And that's been the prevailing evidence. It's not actual documentary evidence, but the inference is clear. Why would you have 120,000 troops right there in that little corner of Ukraine, which is a huge country, unless you're planning to use that army to sweep in on a blitzkrieg and invade the Donbass region? Has there emerged any proof positive, documentary evidence, satellite photos, something that is rock solid to demonstrate that the Ukrainians were about to invade? Has that emerged yet, Pepe, or not? Yet?
Okay, I can give a very short answer. It's a very, very good question. What we know on the record, it's what Narishkin told Putin. He said, look, it's going to happen. We have 3 possible dates, and it is going to happen. So Narishkin is the head of SVR, Russian Foreign Intelligence. They have loads of informers on the other side of the line
yeah.
of contact.
No question.
So,
No
so we
question.
can assume that he was 99% correct, right?
Yeah.
And that was essential, the essential input for the major decision. Should we stay or should we go? So this is what we know on the record, Gonzalo and all of you. We don't know the background, which was something that was discussed in that essential meeting of the Security Council just before Putin launched the SMO. What they discussed in the background, we have no idea, and there were no leaks about it. So I can imagine that what
Naryshkin released this
knew,
information?
Gonzalo, what was Patrushev knew.
Mm-hmm.
So when Patrushev is Yoda, when Patrushev said, "Yeah, that's it," it happens.
No, but has there been this how can I put it? What I want to know is clear documentary evidence that you could say, here, look, here it shows that the Ukrainian armed forces.
You mean maps, Gonzalo? You mean maps, right?
Not maps or satellite photos, because map on its own doesn't mean anything.
This is a national security information. If you talk to Russian analysts, they'll tell you they will never release this information publicly.
But
the only thing I can add to that, if I may, is
Mike,
the OSCE published a report not long ago about the ceasefire infractions or violations from the 16th February running up to the 24th. There were thousands, like 3,000 in one day. And they even highlighted with a heat map of where these bombardments took place. It was quite, again, it's not proof, is it, Gonzalo? It's inference, as you've said.
It's a very good indicator, because it was progressing exponentially day by day, right, iEarlGrey? Yes, I remember looking at this report. 1,400, 1,500, 2,000 bombs and shelling every day and going like this.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I've seen those graphs that it was just
you've seen it.
all of a sudden, in mid-February, I think it was. It started just
going exactly up. Mid-February, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, it's inferences, but aren't we all kind of surprised? I know I am, at the fact that there were so many fortifications in the Donbass from the Ukraine side. I mean, layers deep.
Holy cow.
They must have been building those from the Maidan coup all the way up to where we are today. So,
and in fact, this is what they did, Alex. They kept building it for 8 years non-stop. Absolutely, yes.
Yeah, and what's so weird is
they were preparing for something.
It seems it was directed by the Americans, by the Pentagon, and it was this basically counting on the stupidity of the Russians to just throw their army at these fortifications. It's basically that approach. I thought was so arrogant. Whoever came up with this idea was just stupid, because he was basically saying, we're going to build up these fortifications, and the only way that they can take us is if they throw human wave after human wave. And the Russians, what did they do? They just held their soldiers back and just pounded the shit out of it. And,
those trench networks.
None of us have really seen an artillery war like this. I mean, the wars that the Americans have fought.
It was World War One.
World War One, exactly.
I'm saying, us here today, all of us viewing what's going on in this conflict, this is very new to us, this type of war that we're seeing in Ukraine. And so I just think, Gonzalo, going to your point, the Americans just kind of said, we're going to build these fortifications. And if there's a conflict, it's going to be, something along the lines of the conflicts that we've been fighting. And so these fortifications are going to grind the Russians down.
And they never expected the artillery firepower, because obviously, every Marchanov says that all the time.
Weapons are running out.
Exactly, they know shit about the Russian armed forces.
No, I mean, the saying goes. I mean, the saying that Stalin said. Quantity has a quality all its own. Yeah, it's unbelievable. And what's remarkable is that all of a sudden the West is realizing that, because of its deindustrialization over the last 30-odd years, 40 years, depending on how you measure it, because the West is hollowed out, industrially speaking, they cannot handle industrial warfare. They're going to run out of ammunition, in a couple of months. So they can't handle a war with Russia or potentially with China,
exactly.
I find it screamingly funny, because I'm here in Ukraine, and all quite frankly, the Zelensky regime are absolute masters at propaganda and information warfare. But you can't win a war with mean tweets. You can't win a war with Ghost of Kiev phantom airplanes. I mean, come on. But they're masters at that bullshit. But I don't know. But by the way, I think that the newest tactic from the Pentagon is that they're going to send troops towards the Russians, and they're going to start misgendering them, and that will cause havoc in the Russian lines. I think that that's the fucking idiots, as far as I'm concerned.
Wow, that's very subversive.
What?
Gonzalo,
Yeah.
Gonzalo, what do you see with your own eyes in Kharkov?
I try to see as little as possible because I don't want to get blown up. Come on.
But when you go out, what do you see?
Well, what happened was that it's very interesting. I came back on the 1st of March because I was in Kiev when the invasion happened. I arrived the night before on the 23rd of February. And I checked into my hotel that evening, and about 5:30 in the morning, my assistant here in Kharkov gave me a call. And she said, turn on the news, the Russians are invading. And I'm like, what? I was like, holy cow. And I started covering the situation. And immediately in the first day, I realized the Russians had no intention of taking Kiev. Because, I was on a hotel in Kiev on Christoforou Avenue, which is like the big drag, the main, like the Wilshire Boulevard, Fifth Avenue kind of thing of Kiev. And, you didn't hear anything going on, any combat or anything of the sort. And, Kiev is a big city. It's spread out. And I started hearing that they had invaded this airport. They had troops over here, over there. And I thought, they're not really going to assault the city. They don't have enough troops. They don't have enough men to assault the city. And I said this, and immediately I was branded a Putin stooge. I started saying, like on the second day, they said that the Zelensky regime started handing out weapons to civilians. And I said that was insane because these poor civilians are going to get killed instantly because either they're going to shoot each other by accident because they're stupid, because they don't have any training, or the Russians, if they come across Russians, are going to blow them away instantly because the Russians are professional soldiers, whereas these civilians don't know, the business end of any of these rifles, And so, again, I'm a Putin stooge. And on the 1st of March, I came down to Kharkov by train. I was under the impression that the lines of communication and transport were cut between Kiev and Kharkov. I was mistaken. And so on the 1st of March, I arrived. Actually, I left on the 28th of February. On the 1st of March, I arrived here. And it was, for the first month and a half, it was extremely quiet. I would say that 80% of the population had left. And then into May, June, the population started to return. I would say, if I had to guess, maybe 50% of the population is in the city. And people are going about their business as best they can. There are restaurants open. And like little places like Café Lviv, which is like a chain of like coffee shops here. They sell coffee and croissants. That's all they sell. And little clues like that things are opening up, and people just get on with their lives, and they don't pay attention to the air raid sirens anymore. I mean, what's the point?
Public transportation, social services, everything working?
Yes. Well, the electricity, heating during February. And electricity, cable, everything is working properly and has never been cut. A couple of times, short outages of just a few hours, no big deal. And let me see, the water supply, no problem.
Water supply,
food in what
food in supermarkets, relatively normal.
Relatively normal, yeah. And what was interesting was that in March. There was no booze, no alcohol. March, April, I would say. There was no alcohol. And a few weeks later, the shelves are full of alcohol again. In fact, last week I bought myself a couple of bottles of Jägermeister, just in case, why
not?
But no, wine and everything. And things are being supplied from the West.
From the West, of course.
Yeah, the food supply is arriving to the northeast and south east of the city. It's pretty much cut. Okay. The west, you can leave. In my own case, I was picked up by the SBU on the 15th of April. And on the 22nd of April, they cut me loose. And part of the condition of my release was that I had to remain in the city. And they have me on some registry. So if I were to leave the city and any law enforcement were to look me up on their computer, they'd spot me and I'd be arrested. And so, of course, that means I can't leave the country. And leaving the city would cause more problems than frankly it's worth.
So you have a resident visa, Gonzalo?
It expired. Okay.
It expired.
Part of the reason that I was in Kiev was to straighten out my residency because I married a Ukrainian woman, so I can stay here as long as I want, but I actually had to do the paperwork. And I was in the process of doing that. I was actually in my final trip to Kiev to iron out that situation. And now I'm screwed. But anyway, that's not important. What's important is that it seems at this point that the Battle of the Donbass is ending. And what it seems very clear is that the Russians have no intention of leaving. And Alex, I'll throw it to you. I do believe that Lavrov or somebody, a heavy hitter, said that they're going to take Odessa one way or the other. Am I misremembering this, or is this accurate?
Oh God.
Or Mike, you heard the
I
same
don't know
thing?
if Mike knows. I don't know.
Not
if a
by
heavy hitter
name.
said they're going to take Odessa.
Not Odessa by name, but other territories. Other territories.
They even included Kherson, which I thought was strange because I thought Kherson was under Russian control. But Lavrov came out with that statement where, he was saying we're playing for keeps. We're not messing around.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's correct, Mike. Yeah, Mike's right. Lavrov did make that statement a few days ago where he said that now, the special military operation has changed. It's not just confined to Donbass and we're going to widen it out. He did make that statement. But I mean, everyone is asking the same question that you just asked, Gonzalo. Since the beginning of this operation, since February 24th, is how far will Russia go? That's
my thinking is that
everyone is asking. Yeah.
At this time, they're going to have to occupy the entire country. And it seems to me that the West is not going to cross the Polish-Ukraine border.
I agree. I agree with you, but my thinking on this is I think everyone should be prepared for the military operation to stop at Donetsk and Lugansk, or the military operation to go all the way to Lviv. I mean, we just don't know. But we should be.
Latest talk is Dnieper River.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing about Putin that I've seen covering him over the years is that he does surprise at times, and he definitely knows how to freeze a conflict. So I'm not saying that they're not going to go all the way to Lviv. I'm not saying that they're not going to take Odessa. I don't know, but there is that possibility that they could. I'm just saying, I'm throwing it out there. They could pause it at Donetsk, Kherson, and whatever they have, Zaporozhye. I'm not saying that's what's going to happen, but everyone should be prepared for something like that. Of course, Colonel Douglas McGregor said in an interview the other day that he believes that Russia is preparing over the next 30 days to make a big move, a knockout blow to Ukraine. I tend to believe that. I think that's what it looks like is taking place. But once again, we're just all speculating here. It's that is the question, Gonzalo. That is the question.
Because they are masters of strategic ambiguity from the beginning. The number one doctrine of the Russian Ministry of Defense is strategic ambiguity. So every jiu-jitsu move that you apply, your adversary, he has no idea where it came from. No
Putin
question about that. What we do know is that if they follow to the letter demilitarization and denazification, then it's all out. It's everywhere.
Yeah.
But there are gradations to that. Maybe the all out will include only the Black Sea coast and forget about the West. Or the all out could be west of the Dnieper as well. And that's where strategic ambiguity will over and over again. Well, they are not in a, what we do know is that they are not in a hurry. I'm sure
Oh
we
yeah, I
all
know.
agree with that. They're
Very
desperate
mellow
people.
about it.
We have all the time
Yeah.
in the world.
Well, the thing is, see, if you look at a map of where they are right now, okay, they have Kherson, they have the Zaporozhye nuclear power plant, and that's 5 kilometers away from Zaporozhye itself. And so, from the point of view of the Russians, it's obvious that they're going to go to Transnistria. I mean, you're so close.
You're
That
so
it seems,
close.
yeah,
Exactly.
it's so foolish to not go to Transnistria. And of course, what you do is you don't hit Odessa, you go around Odessa, and you link up with Transnistria. And all of a sudden, what happens to Odessa? It's cut off from the rest of Ukraine, and so you just wait. It's like an apple that'll fall off the tree all on its own. You don't have to pull it, right? And insofar as Kharkov is concerned, where I am, again, Kharkov is the second largest city. It's a population of, I think, 1.2 million. I always forget. I should always look it up, but I never do. But anyway, 1.2 million, something like that. But right now, it's a lot less people. But the point is that it's very spread out. And so to assault it is crazy. To go around it, that's easy. Okay. So it seems obvious that what they would do is go around Kharkov all the way to the Dnieper River. And again, with Odessa, go around Odessa all the way to Transnistria. And they can certainly hold everything to the west, to the east, rather, of the Dnieper River and south of Zaporozhye, including Zaporozhye. And do keep in mind, to the north of Odessa, pretty much up until Ternopil, I don't have a map right in front of me, but it's cow country. There's nothing.
There's nothing.
So, yeah. And so it's relatively easy to take that country. I mean, frankly, once they get over the speed bump of Kramatorsk in the east, there is really nothing between Kramatorsk all the way to Dnipro. And that would give the impetus also for the army at Kherson to make the big push all the way to Transnistria. So, I mean, that seems to be what will happen now.
Can I add some more to what you just said, Gonzalo? An article yesterday or the day before in Russian media was Transnistria announced the intention to join the Russian Federation.
Oh yeah, I heard that.
Yeah,
yes,
I'm glad it wasn't just me.
It was everywhere in Russian media, absolutely, and Telegram channels.
So this popped up.
Yeah,
this popped up, which I think corroborates kind of what you're saying. Regardless whether they take Odessa or not, Transnistria is in there somewhere. Like it factors into the plans.
Absolutely.
Somewhere. There was another article which lent into was it you, Alex, who said about Putin freezing a conflict? Sorry.
No, yeah, you're right. My point is that they know the Russians and Putin, they know how to freeze conflicts. I'm not saying they're going to do it in this, but they know how. I mean, they've got many frozen conflicts right now.
Yeah, and this was in an article. I thought it was with Melnik, this disgraced ambassador, German. Ukrainian.
Oh,
he's
that
Ukrainian ambassador.
That guy was a fucking idiot.
I was reading this article from Ukrainian media where he was explaining how it wasn't because of his Bandera stuff, where it was just rotation and all this. He was playing it down. But I think later on in the article, and I could be mistaken, I may be conflating two articles, but I believe it mentioned how the Ukrainian fear is that Russia will do exactly what you just said, Alex. So they'll move up, let's say, as Lavrov has just said, he named Nikolaev actually as well, I think, as another region. So Zaporozhye, Kherson, Nikolaev. So he set up this next phase, let's call it. Their fear was then Russia will freeze. But that won't be the end of it. They'll freeze, wait, regroup, and then expand again.
Exactly.
And incrementally. So potentially it could end up at Lvov, whichever you want to call it, eventually. But the Ukrainians are worried that, Putin will just put the pause button and then there we go. That was in the media.
Can I come back a little bit to the economic corridors, if you don't mind?
No.
We haven't spoken about the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. And the interconnection between BRICS
I mentioned
Plus.
Egypt had applied to join it, which I think is quite important.
Exactly. You mentioned Egypt, very, very, very important. And the fact that Iran, the summit of the SCO is in September in Samarkand. That's when Iran will become officially a full-time member of the SCO. And they're looking around as well as other potential partners, Southeast Asia, in the former MENA, Middle East, Northern Africa. And the interconnection between BRICS Plus, the SCO, the Eurasia Economic Union, and this push towards reserve currency, which is the key job at the moment of Glaziev as the economic head of the Eurasia Economic Union. He's designing how could they start a basket of currencies as reserve currency backed by gold and commodities, basically in the case of Russia. And he's discussing face to face with the Chinese. And this is essential because if the Russians and the Chinese come up with an agreement of launching this reserve currency, first starting with Russia and with the Eurasia Economic Union and China, and then expanding to East Asia, Central Asia, South Asia, and West Asia as well, then it's really, really serious. It's a very, very long process, but this train has already left the station. And in parallel to all that is the economic how the Chinese are going to reorient their economic corridors. Coming back to our discussion at the beginning of Lisbon to Vladivostok. Lisbon to Vladivostok was a Russian concept expressed by Putin for the first time in 2007. The Chinese were paying attention. In the Chinese mind is Shanghai to Vladivostok, but it's the same thing.
Yeah.
So what Putin had in mind is what the Chinese, in fact, made operational through all these corridors of the Belt and Road. So the problem now is the corridor that goes through the Trans-Siberian and the corridor that links Kazakhstan with Russia. So what the Chinese are going to do, they're going to invest heavily in what they call the Central Asian corridor. And that's where the strategic partnership with Iran comes in. And the fact that Iran now is going to be a BRICS member sooner or later, already an SCO member, and with a strategic partnership, not only with China, but also with Russia. So Iran, in terms of the major pivot at the heart of the heartland, is going to be Iran from now on. And that's why they're so excited in Tehran. For the first time that I've seen them like this. The Persians are usually very circumspect. They're excellent diplomats and they're very realist as well. And they don't brag easily. And now they're saying, wow, maybe what we suffer for the past 40 years, now finally there's an end, a light at the end of the tunnel, because now they are incorporated into the big connectivity plans of both Russia and China. And also their relationship with Turkey is the best in the past few years, at least that we can remember. You know.
Well, what's interesting about
go ahead.
Yeah, the interesting thing about the Iranian situation is that Russia has always wanted to have closer relations with Iran.
Yes,
I mean they're the natural allies. You know, they have a shared border, they have shared interests. And so there is no reason for them not to be friends, but the Russians were always reticent because they didn't want to get the blowback from the sanctions applied to Iran. But now that Russia is, they got the full force of the Western sanctions. Now it doesn't matter to the Russians because, they already took the hit. So now they can be friends. Exactly. They can be friends with Iran and bring Iran a lot closer to Russia, or Russia closer to Iran, as you see fit, as whichever way you want to look at it. It's the same thing. But what happens is that the Russia-China relationship remains. And so Russia becomes the intermediary between Iran and China, if only, just to smooth the issues of the Iranian sanctions. And so Iran will be naturally drawn into this sphere, this polarity between Russia and China, leaving Europe. Europe becomes just left out. Europe becomes the historical backwater that it has always been.
That it was for most centuries when Eurasia was ruling the world. No?
Yeah, exactly.
But two extra pieces of information that may be very helpful for all of you that are watching, in fact. The Caspian Summit is absolutely essential. Yeah. So what do we have at the Caspian Summit? We have, among others, Putin and Raisi side by side with the other three leaders of the Caspian littoral nations, Azerbaijan, Turkmenistan, and Kazakhstan. And their major decision, NATO, forget it. You'll never come here. Never, never. And now it's set in stone.
Yeah.
So the Caspian is an Eurasian sea. It's mostly a Russian sea with some Kazakh overtones in an Iranian sea. But that's it. And it will be essential in the interconnection of all these corridors. And now we enter into the International North-South Transportation Corridor, the NSTC. So you see that all these strategies and corridors and organizations, they are converging all the time. In the past, we were always desperate because it was very slow. And now it's so fast that we cannot even keep up.
Well, what's fascinating is that Europe forgot the reason that it became powerful. It was powerful because it traded with everyone. And it traded with sides.
And it stole from everyone, Gonzalo.
And it stole, fine. But the thing is, it tried to play both sides off the middle. It didn't have this weird ideological bent that has, evolved over the past few years, over the past couple of decades, really, of, this democracy bullshit, because it's not democratic. Whatever you want to call the European and American systems, they're not democracies. You want to call them oligarchies, you want to call them, managed kleptocracies, whatever you want to call it, but they're not a democracy. But this insistence on pushing this ideology isolated Europe. I can't believe that they did this. I still can't get over it. Alex, you have been just silently thinking. Tell us what you're thinking.
No, I'm listening to what you guys have to say, and I'm very happy that Pepe, you brought up the Caspian, because a lot of people have kind of ignored this development of what happened at the Caspian summit and what's going on with the Caspian Sea. From a military perspective, once the Russians wrap up control of the Black Sea and they now control the Caspian Sea along with the stands and Iran,
exactly.
It is an absolute checkmate move, and no one is talking about this, Gonzalo, and the collective West is so consumed with their Russophobia, their green ideology, and the fact that they have made a conscious choice. The Europeans have actually followed the Biden White House, making a conscious choice to commit this kind of suicide, this death, on the hill that is called Ukraine. It is absolutely stunning. It amazes me every day when I wake up. It amazes me to think of the times we're living in and to realize that Europe has chosen this fate for itself, and they've chosen this by following the Joe Biden White House. I mean, when you take a step back and think about it, it's incredible. But you're absolutely right. And one more point, and I'm listening to everything that all of you guys are saying, and Pepe said something that a lot of people just kind of they don't really think about. But Alexander made the same point a while back in one of the shows that we did, and it has to do with the fact that when the special military operation got underway, the Russians were very mindful to consider how exactly how this affects China, how this affects India, how this affects Turkey, because they understand that the Chinese diplomacy is going to have to also deal with this conflict in Ukraine. So as they were making their military moves, they were very conscious to brief the Chinese, to brief the Iranians, the Turks, the Indians, to make sure that they weren't boxed in diplomatically as well. And that's a lot of reason why you've seen the approach towards Ukraine happen the way it has happened. Yes, there is a military component. Yes, there's a fortifications component, and the Russians have to move slowly. And of course, the Russians care about Donbass, and they care about the people in what was traditionally known as Novorossiya, and they don't want to damage Odessa, and they want to try to minimize all these things. But the Russians also understood that they have to also consider their partners. They have to consider China and how they're going to work it from a diplomatic angle, India, Turkey, Iran. They were very conscious of these things. And what you said, Pepe, a lot of times we don't think about these things,
Yes.
but the Russians were thinking about these things,
Of course,
when they
of
decided to do what they did.
What's interesting is that the Russians have adults leading their foreign policy and their diplomacy. And let's give
Changes
credit where
everything.
credit is due.
Exactly.
You have Lavrov. I think that he will be considered retrospectively perhaps one of the most brilliant diplomats ever, because he really did position his country in a way that this conflict, far from hurting it, he is getting so much mileage out of it with the countries that actually matter. Because quite frankly, Europe, the United States, their economies are in chaos. They are over indebted to over 100% of their GDP. In some cases, it's clocking in close to 200% of their GDP. Whereas the countries of the global South, India, China, Southeast Asia, Africa, the Middle East, they are all on friendly terms with Russia. When Joe Biden went to Saudi Arabia, Mohammed bin Salman, almost kicked him in the behind. Yeah? Whereas when Putin, when MBS needs to talk to Russia, he's the one who calls Putin, because that was interesting. In the latest conversation that they had, the diplomatic he called, although the Russians were very careful not to say who called, but he was the one who made the call. And that just goes to show the professionalism,
that's it. Someone commented that it seems that in the East they're professionals. You see the Chinese foreign ministry as well.
Yes,
they're very professional.
Oh,
you talked about Taoist sort of,
and the Iranians as well.
Yeah, absolutely. The professionals are everywhere but the EU and the US. We saw Newland make that panicked tour of EU and even to India as well. Do you remember that?
Yes,
Scrambling.
That was screamingly funny.
Unreal. And the pantomime in the West, I've seen, it's been calculated professionalism everywhere else.
Yeah, and the worst part is that when Newland goes on these tours, she only carries a stick. There no candy for anybody. It's just a stick, Do it, or I'm going to bang you on the head. What the hell? That's not diplomacy. That's bullying. And that's all that the Americans and the Europeans know. And what's the name of what's her face? The foreign minister for Germany.
Brabach.
Oh my God, Annalena Grune.
No, Baerbock, right?
Exactly. I called her Annalena Grune because Grune is green in German.
Yeah.
Oh,
and
okay.
She's thick as a brick. And she's thick as
you're hurting the feelings of bricks everywhere.
Exactly, bricks everywhere. You betcha. But guys, look, I wish I could take all of you and our audience on a one-day tour of the European Commission in Brussels. I'm sure all of you would understand everything you need to know about democratic Europe. That's all you need to know. Spend one day over there.
Okay, give us the 411.
So you have, between the EU and the EC, you have 60,000 bureaucrats with salaries that are absolutely absurd, retiring with full pensions, not paying income tax, and the only thing that they think about their future is the day they're going to retire and get a palace on the beach in Koh Samui in Thailand. I'm not joking, because I know some people personally who actually did that, So while you are inside, you see people going up and down with folders, color-coded folders of each EC policy, translated into 150 languages, which obviously they don't read. And this is what they approve in their sessions. And then you talk to the so-called commissioners, the guys who, for instance, the guy in charge of the common European energy policy, which is usually a stupid bureaucrat who doesn't know anything about that because he was appointed by someone. And then you get the other, when you talk to the foreign ministries, for instance, in France or in Italy, they say, look, when we hate somebody, we dispatch them to Brussels. So at least we get rid of them. And that explains Annalena Baerbock, that explains Ursula von der Leyen. also known as Ursula von der Leyen, and also known in German as Ursula von der Leyen. So it's the worst thing. Do you remember Federica Mogherini? She was expelled to Brussels by the Italian foreign ministry. So this is what happens. So these people land in Brussels with those salaries, with those color-coded folders, and they start spitting decisions that they make, unelected officials, on behalf of 550,000 million European voters. It's completely absurd. And this is something that if you spend 12 hours at the Parlement in Brussels, you see for yourself. And then you understand what democracy is all about in Europe. And then you understand that when you have Draghi or Macron doing the Brussels job in France or in Italy, you know who they belong to or who controls them. You know, it's absolutely horrible. I've never seen anything like it. It's like the worst Kafkaesque nightmare, but live in front of you and sold as liberal, progressive, democratic, you know.
Chat, I need your help. What's the name of a government by bureaucracy? A kleptocracy is a government of thieves. You know, an oligarchy is a government of rich people. But what's the name of a government by bureaucracy? There's a word for it, and it's just slipping my mind because that
is it kakistocracy?
Kakistocracy? Chat,
Yes.
you guys, kakistocracy.
Yeah,
that's what the chat is telling you. Kakistocracy. It sounds like
Kakistocracy. I'm sorry.
Like
Sorry. Yes.
shit-tocracy. But you know, it's like you know, Ursula von der Leyen. I read a profile of her recently, and it was so fascinating because in the profile, which was fairly in depth, there was not even a whisper of the fact that she plagiarized. They calculated something like 40%.
She plagiarized her thesis. Absolutely. Yeah. She lied about
40% of it.
You name it. She was expelled for corruption from the Ministry of Defense. She's considered in Germany as the worst Minister of Defense ever. Like Bismarck is still rolling in his grave when he hears the name von der Leyen.
Just like a rotisserie chicken. That's how he's rolling, you know, because of her. And you know, nobody says anything. And in the press, you know, I sometimes, well, I don't wonder this anymore. I used to wonder about this, of course, but why is it that, you know, four fools such as ourselves get quite a large audience? Right now, we've got 7,500 people watching us, and you know, these live streams often get over 100,000 views. Mm-hmm. And why is it that people are listening to us? Because we're saying what's actually happening. And the accredited press, the credentialed press, all they do is lie. I mean, it's sometimes I just can't get over the fact that they lie as much as they do. And
Gonzalo,
it's a tragedy. Just a quick point.
Go ahead.
The tragedy for me is that, see, I'm a man of the West, and the West is a good idea, but the people that we have put in charge of this very, very good idea are fucking incompetent imbeciles, and nobody is putting a stop to them. Yep. Pepe, please take it away from me, because if I'm going, I'll rant forever.
I wish we had time, maybe in another occasion, so I can talk to you about the Lügenpresse or the lying media everywhere, because I am part of the business.
Sure.
I am a professional foreign correspondent since 1985. Mm-hmm. So I started in journalism in the daily newspaper business in 1982. So I know the industry from the inside in 3 continents, in South America, North America, Europe, and in Asia. So what Gonzalo is saying is, let's say this is the mantra for mainstream media all over the world. It is based on a gigantic lying industry. And when you work inside a large newsroom in a large newspaper, which is a very, very, very tricky business, because you have to navigate pressure from everywhere, starting with the owner, with the advertisers, with stupid editors, you name it. And when you are a correspondent, it's even worse, because they don't even know what you're writing about. So that's even worse. So I experienced all this, and then discussing with my fellow journalists, for instance, La Stampa in Turin, Le Monde in Paris, Financial Times in London, etc. The ones that left, like, my generation, most of them either left or are dead. I'm one of the only ones remaining. And of course, I'm not part of mainstream media anymore. Asia Times was in between mainstream media and independent until it was bought by a bunch of bankers. And then we are in deep trouble. And I am at hybrid war with them at the moment, unfortunately. But what I learned from these 35 years or so from inside the mainstream media and the line media, wow, it's this could be like 10 books at least. How does the New York Times rewrites an AP report and starts lying from the headline to the captions to the last paragraph?
Yeah,
because this is what they do essentially. How, for instance, AP sends an AP reporter to a press conference and the text is already written in the newsroom and the guy gets one quote or maybe two quotes maximum, and the quote is inserted in the pre-written text and completely distorted. This is how it works, guys. It's mind-blowing, but it's an industry. It's a lying industry in mega industrial proportions. So obviously, when nowadays people, why they are watching us, to answer Gonzalo's question, because they simply cannot read the Washington Post or the New York Times and believe one word they're saying. It's simple as that.
Okay, I want to turn the conversation to a slightly different direction. What we are seeing is a profound realignment of the West and Russia. We are clearly seeing as Europe's economy goes down the tubes, but also we're noticing or realizing, at least most of us are realizing, that the Western dynamo is over, that it's just exhausted and it's just circling the drain at this point. And so I'm kind of curious as to your thoughts, and this might sound a little random, but I'm very interested in this topic. Where do you think culturally, civilizationally, if you will, we are going to be going into the future? What will be we four of us are men of the West, whether we like it or not. We grew up in the West. It's our cultural background. Pepe, you're Brazilian, as I understand it.
Yes,
and
I was born in Brazil. I lived the first part of my life in Brazil, but at 20-something, I was out of the country. And at 30-something, I left for good.
Yeah.
So I lived, yeah. But I am a... Yes, I am a Brazilian European American. Let's put it this way, And right. Then I became Asian because I fell in love with Asia, and I said the only way for me to understand Asia is to live in Asia. So now I consider myself even more Thai than anything else.
But my question becomes this: where will the center of gravity be for us men of the West? We who are culturally Westerners. If Europe, if the United States is essentially collapsing, where are we going to be going? Because to tell you the truth, and this is not Russian propaganda or any bullshit, I'm just trying to look at the state of play as it is. It seems that the center of gravity of Western civilization, I'm talking about the civilization, the culture, the foci of thinking, is going to be shifting definitively to Russia, of all places. That Russia will wind up being this cradle of Western civilization, as what has been traditionally known as Western civilization, Europe, North America, as those two continents sink. Do you guys agree with this, disagree, and why do you agree or disagree? Mike, let me throw it to you because I see you nodding there.
Yeah, I'm nodding because I referenced this in a couple of my previous videos. Dr. Jordan B. Peterson, very controversial character, I'm aware. He put out a really good video, in my opinion, that was called The Civil War in the West, talking about Ukraine. Again, I don't agree with a lot. In fact, the majority of what he talks about in that video. But there was one key point that I actually featured where he talked about this, everything that's going on. Yes, we have the physical manifested in Ukraine right now. But the main battlefield is actually the war of ideas and ideology. That's you've got the wokeism in the West, this degradation, rot, whatever you want to call it, that's set in there. And the reason he said, I call it a civil war, is Russia is part of the West. And as you've just rightly said, Gonzalo, these ideals. And yeah, they've had the West has had its propaganda fun with the more conservative attitudes. And Putin's even alluded to this in his speeches, but it's almost the last
non-traditional relationship.
Yeah, that was a wonderful one, wasn't it?
like
Even
little
calling them
stick it in.
neo-colonials and all this stuff. But it feels like the last bastion of common sense, I think, is to really round it up. And when you say where do we go, Gonzalo, do you mean physically or do you mean ideologically?
Both.
Where do we align? Mm-hmm.
Both. I'll throw it at you.
Yeah. So obviously, I physically I went to Russia, and I'm here. And ideologically speaking, yes, I'm far more aligned. I like what I see. I like how when the officials talk, I'm not left guessing what they actually mean. Putin says what he's going to do, and he does it. Lavrov doesn't dress up a word salad for what he intends to communicate. I don't see the PR in China's diplomats either, or others. I see a lot of posturing and all this stuff, and absolute nonsense from like John Kirby telling us that Syria started because of climate change and a drought. You see, and this is why, answering the previous question, this is why people, I guess, watch us or sources that don't insult their intelligence, and there, I think, is another point where people feel that their intelligence now in the West is being insulted.
Sorry, just for the chat, some people in chat don't catch the joke. What happened was that John Kirby, who's the spokesperson at this time, I believe, of the Pentagon, correct me if I'm wrong.
Pentagon.
He said that the conflict in Syria started because of global warming, which is absurd. It was a color revolution started by the Americans, of all people, of course. Who else starts color revolutions? They wanted to get rid of Assad, and it didn't quite go the way that they wanted it to go, and that's why we've had this civil war for the past dozen years or so. And so for him to claim that it all started, the Syria conflict started because of climate change, is like saying that World War II started because of Humpty Dumpty falling off the wall. It's just absurd, it's just ridiculous. But I'm sorry, Mike, I just wanted to insert that. And
no, that's fine. Thank you. Yeah, it's just, I was even reminded of something else. I don't think we'll keep going down comedy, but I think that's
come on, give us a laugh.
I featured a few, and Alex has had a few good clown stories, clown world anecdotes. There was something. I've lost it now, but it's okay. That was the gist of what I wanted to say. So I agree with Dr. Peterson's theory that this is much more than just a special military operation in Ukraine and all this stuff. I think it is, and this is why the whole world is so captivated and focused on this. It is more of a war of ideas and ideologies.
What happens to me is that I'm sort of like an intellectual gadfly. I just do different things, and right now I'm writing a book on the leadership class that we have in the West. And what I'm realizing is that the things that I'm writing, if I were to publish them, well, first of all, no reputable publisher in the West would publish them, not because it's poorly written, but because there are too many things that are accurate that people don't want to hear. And, mainstream publishing is not interested in telling the truth. It's interested in appealing to its audience with fantasies. And so I'm not going to be able to get a mainstream publisher, even though I have been published by mainstream publishers in the past. And so I'd have to do self-publishing. And if I were to self-publish it by way of Amazon or one of these other online vehicles, I would be subject to censorship. And this is absurd, but this is what the West has decayed into. And
Putin said totalitarianism, didn't he, in his last speech?
I beg your pardon?
Putin mentioned about how the West is showing more signs of
totalitarian. Correct. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, Pepe, like you're seeing it. You're a journalist. How many times have you been silenced? Well, you were on Twitter. You had a huge following on Twitter, and you got. Why were you banned from Twitter? Please tell us so that we can all have a laugh.
Because of Ukraine. My last tweet was on Mariupol. This was the tweet that got me banned, in fact. In fact, it was Scott Ritter and myself and the ASB military channel, which was very, very good. We were banned at 2 or 3 days interval, in the same week. Well, I was banned from Facebook last year because of Iran. So it's political censorship. It's so obvious.
Yeah,
on
political
Facebook,
censorship.
it was on Iran, and
Yeah.
on Twitter, it was on NATO stand against Russia, Ukraine.
Oh, you were banned on Facebook as well?
Yes, last year because of my coverage of Soleimani.
Oh, what did you say, by the way?
And I learned later on that I was on their radar because I had been to Iran many times, because I interviewed people over there, because I was always writing about Iran, etc. And they obviously didn't like what I was saying. So I was on their radar for a while. And on Twitter, some friends in California told me that, yes, they are looking at you because your account is new and it was going up too fast. So I immediately enter into their... It's so stupid. What can I do? That's Stupidistan works like this, right? So coming back to your question, Gonzalo.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my God, this I could really go on for 3 days, but okay, let's do it in Hollywood. Okay, give me your pitch in 25 words.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, I lived in Hollywood as well. You lived in Hollywood. I also did.
I
So
worked there for a while.
I learned a lot of tricks over there. Yeah.
I learned how to pick up actresses.
So you learned the most important couching trick of them all.
And I was a writer, so
Yeah.
because there's a joke for the chat. Okay, there's a famous
of course.
joke. There was this Polish actress, and you know how stupid this Polish actress was? When she went to her first Hollywood party, she went home with the writer.
Oh my God, she picked the wrong guy. Yes. But the cultural clash, in fact, it's for us in the West is an enormous problem, because the whole framework of Western culture is now subordinated to American soft power and American pop culture. So we are not discussing Heraclitus or Plato or Aristotle anymore, or even Renaissance Neoplatonists. No, we are discussing American pop culture, essentially.
The Kardashians' ass, literally.
Exactly. So this is already a debasement of the best of the history of Western culture, right? Mm-hmm. We don't discuss, for instance, the reasons that led to the Renaissance, for instance. We don't discuss different opinions among Enlightenment writers, for instance. We don't even discuss the best writers of the past 200 years. Proust, Joyce, Eliot, nothing anymore.
We can't even debate anymore.
It's only pop culture. I'm sorry?
The ability, I feel that the ability to debate has gone in the West.
The ability, exactly. And now with the single narrative imposed by this Atlanticist ethos, or a non-ethos, in fact, which is a single narrative, we don't accept any deviation. And if you do, you're immediately canceled.
Yeah.
So now, for instance, for all of us, we are free spirits, and I'm sure our audience today, people are free spirits. They love debate. They love confrontations. They love thesis, synthesis, antithesis kind of universe. Many of us study that in school. How does it work? And that's gone. There's no thesis and antithesis anymore.
What I find
it's not even a synthesis, no? That's it.
Yeah,
and,
what I find
that's our truth, and that's the truth.
Yeah, exactly. And what bothers me the most is that the contemporary problems that we have that are very serious, they're not being discussed at all. And the first most obvious problem is that the leadership class is completely disconnected from the common people, from the working people. And we see this every day, of how the leadership class, irrespective of their socioeconomic level, those people who identify as part of the leadership class, they look down on the common people, on the working people, working class people, with contempt. And they don't seem to understand that the leadership class exists because of the base of the working class people. And that is to the benefit of the leadership class to look after the best interests of the working class people who have created this civilization that we're lucky enough to enjoy. There's none of this conversation, none of this serious debate on these issues.
And the best minds who are trying this conversation, Gonzalo, for instance, I'm thinking about some academics in the US, for instance, or in Italy or in Germany. They are completely marginalized. They have to go to a microsite on Telegram or whatever to have their essays, brilliant essays, by the way, published or at least read by a few thousand people, when they should be on the front cover of New York
Time
Times
magazine,
and Company, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, and
It's very, very sad. And my friends in academia, a little bit in there, they all tell me that the destruction of academia from the inside is it's
catastrophic.
astonishing. It's
catastrophic.
absolutely astonishing. I'll give you a small example. Like one of the best schools of international relations in the world used to be Sciences Po in Paris,
Right?
Sciences Politique, and nowadays is an Ursula von der Leyen territory. To give you an idea, you know, they destroyed it completely.
Yeah.
You know, the Sorbonne, for instance, you have one guy among 500 who manages to publish a book which was read by only a few people, where he conceptualizes in Europe for the first time the notion of techno-feudalism. It was published by I would say, I'm not trying to, a minor professor at the Sorbonne, and it should be on the front page of every French newspaper. No, it was absolutely ignored. Was not translated into English as well, which would, you know, I'm sure you would find its public, its enormous audience in the English-speaking world. Nothing, you know. So they are completely isolated. There's a guy in Italy, for instance. There's a professor of philosophy in Italy, Andrea Zoc, University of Milan. He wrote the best book of critique of neoliberalism since David Harvey or Domenico Lo Surdo or Giovanni Arrighi. These guys were, you know, most of them are dead or almost dying. Completely ignored in it. Not a word about his book in Italian mainstream media. So it's very sad.
Well, it seems to me that the intellectual classes in the West, or let me phrase that, the intellectual dissidents are going to have to find a place to congregate. Perhaps, I mean, online certainly, but see, I do believe that we are getting to a point where these dissident thinkers are going to be actively persecuted in the West. We're already seeing how certain people who have dissident opinions, they get their bank accounts frozen or canceled. This girl, Alina Lip, have you heard of her?
Yes,
she's this
Alina
reporter.
Lip, exactly.
Yeah, she's a reporter for Chad, who you don't know. Alina Lip is a reporter in the Donbass region in Donetsk. She's German by nationality. She speaks Russian. She's been reporting what she sees, and because of this, the German government has frozen her bank account, frozen her father's bank account, which is like weird, and she is being prosecuted and potentially will spend 3 years in jail. And get this, she's not allowed to defend herself. It's this weird Star Chamber prosecution, and you know, with no possibility of any kind of appeal or even defense of her own position. And she hasn't done anything. She's just reporting what she sees. Alex, you know the story I'm talking about, right?
Yeah, I know the story. You know, it's just something that we have to all go through. We just have to all pass through this time period that we're experiencing: the censorship, the deplatforming, the silencing of different voices, the banning of bank accounts. This is just something that we have to pass through, all of us, whether you're living in the East or the West or anywhere in between. You know, I don't think we're at a period of time anymore where it's left and right. I think it's globalist and not globalist, to put it simply. I mean, I know I'm simplifying things out, but you know, either you believe in this globalist, neoliberal, neocon kind of thinking, and there are a lot of people that do, or you don't. And now your politics on a domestic level could be very left, could be very right, and that usually deals with domestic issues. But the big picture of things is either I buy into this globalist utopia or I don't. And I think more along the lines of my community, my family, my friends, my state, my city, and I think along these lines. And you know, I think that's where we are right now. And we're going to have to pass through this period where the globalists are going to want to centralize as much power as they can. And they have the ability to centralize because of technology. Technology, it's a double-edged sword. Here we are on YouTube talking about all of these interesting topics, while at the same time, we all know that, YouTube is holding, a sword above our heads. And anytime they want, they could lower that sword down on us, and for all the talk about, leaving the United States or the UK or moving west, we get this question a lot. I know, Mike, you must get this question all the time. How can I get to Russia? Look, personally, I love Russia. I could live there. I would like to go back and live there. I've lived there before. I've also lived in Mexico, and I love Mexico, and I love Greece, and I definitely love the United States of America. But finding a place to live, if that's what you want, is about exploration, and you have to go and see different places, because going somewhere may not be what you expected in your mind. And a lot of people like where they live. A lot of people like living in Wyoming or Florida or Mexico City or Uruguay. And, moving is not an option. You have friends, you have family, you have your culture. You have a lot of things that tie you to a location. But wherever you are in the world, there's a lot of people that think like you. And in the United States, where you have the most powerful forces of globalization and green ideology and wokeness, you also have powerful forces which are trying to tear that down. For every YouTube, which is super ultra powerful, you have Rumble in Florida, you have Odyssey, you have, other services which are trying to fight against this centralization and control. Are these other platforms perfect? No. Do they have the technology of Google's and Facebook's? No. Will they get there? Yes, but it's going to take time. But Gonzalo, one thing that I think will accelerate everything is going to be when the countries that are involved in this globalization and this centralization, when their citizens go hungry.
Yeah.
Yes.
When they go hungry, everything is going to change. Wokeness is great. This new kind of liberalism, which I don't understand. I believe in traditional liberalism. That's what I grew up with, being a traditional liberal. To me, that was a very endearing thing. It was very charming, traditional liberalism. This new liberalism, I don't understand it. But when these people that buy into this woke ideology and this green ideology go hungry, everything is out the window. Everything. And the final point I want to make is that the centralization and control, right now we're seeing it from the West. But it could happen in Russia. It could happen in China. This multipolar world, I believe, is going to be a lot of give and take, a lot of push and pull with regards to governments trying to control their citizens using the technology that they have at their fingertips. China's going to try it. Russia's going to try it. We know that the US is doing it. We know that the UK is doing it, the EU. So I mean, nowhere is going to be perfect, and we're going to always have to stay vigilant, and we're always going to have to keep an eye out for giving too much of our personal information, too much of control to the politicians and to the leaders. I mean, that's always going to be there, I think, going forward. Going back to the journalism thing, what Pepe said, absolutely, the journalism has died. These traditional media companies have died, but they've died because of technology. Mm-hmm. I mean, these people are slaves to the technology, and they understand that they cannot make money now by selling subscriptions to newspapers. That's done. There's no such thing as paying $20 a month to get the New York Times. There's no money in clicks. There's no money in banner ads. So who's controlling this media? It's governments. I've worked with many publications in Greece and Cyprus. I know exactly where they make their money. They make their money from governments. You would be surprised how many publications in Greece and Cyprus are making their money from, say, the UK government or from the US government. You would be shocked to find out how many are actually making their payroll because Brussels or London or DC is actually sending them the money to make those payrolls. So, this is just something we're going to have to get through, but I think it's going to get accelerated. Putin has accelerated it with a special military operation. I think the timeline has been thrown off course. Putin has accelerated this multipolar world, this coming of the multipolar world. And some people may think of it as a bad thing. Some people may think of it as a good thing. The collapse has to happen. The hunger most likely is going to have to happen. The energy crisis most likely is going to have to happen. And we're just going to have to push through it. And eventually we'll make it. But it's going to be tough. It's not going to be easy.
Can I add to Alex, just 2 points? It's okay. One thing that we've already seen, Alex, you mentioned about like this woke and the green is going to suffer as people get hungry. We're already seeing Austria with the coal-fired power plants, so much for the green agenda, already fallen by the wayside as crisis sets in. And then the other thing you said, I think Jimmy Dore covered this, I want to say Smith something. It's a piece of law that Obama signed in where the government pays off these newspapers. They basically can get subsidies for just towing the party line. The official.
In Canada, that's the way all of the news in Canada survives. They get government stipends, and
it's in plain sight. It's literally in black and white.
Yeah,
it's fact.
Now, Pepe, you're in Western Europe. You're in Paris, based in Paris. When do you think the food riots start?
I think they're going to start in Germany first.
I'm not even kidding.
Germany is not as well prepared as France. France is extremely centralized, and they already put in place a sort of emergency planning for the next few months. Mm-hmm. For instance, the electricity bills in France compared to Germany, they are not as absurd.
Right.
French agriculture is extremely competent and effective and efficient. Mm-hmm. So I don't see food riots in France, but I certainly do see them. They could happen in Italy as well, in parts of Italy as well, because Italy under Draghistan was completely destroyed. For me, it's horrible. I am Italian at heart. I have a lot of friends in Italy. I go all the time. Mm-hmm. And when we discuss what Draghi managed to do in Italy in 1 year and a half on behalf of Brussels, it's absolutely it's beyond appalling.
Can you fill in our audience about it, please?
Basically, privatization en masse everywhere. All those so-called COVID-19 rules were basically enacted to alienate the working classes completely and squeeze them to the max. Like, even to the point of if you are a retiree in the Campania somewhere, you cannot go to the post office to pick up your check if you don't have 2 vaccinations or a booster. That kind of stuff. Can you imagine that they passed laws, decrees, presidential Draghistan decrees from one day to another, like stuff like that, Well, the banking casino in Italy, which is of course notorious all over the world, but in European terms is one of the worst, and all the banks, and they have cross operations with French banks and German banks. So if a big Italian bank like Unicredit goes down, you see a domino effect all across Europe, So, and Draghi, basically, what was he doing? He was ruling like Mussolini soft, by decree, without paying zero attention to. Okay, the Italian Parliament is also another disgrace, but there are some.
But they've always been a disgrace.
Competent voices in the a small minority. Let's put it this way. So, what are we going to have next? It's going to be something that can be even worse. It's going to be a center-right, extreme-right alliance, probably, which is going to be the next Italian government, including Berlusconi in the. What the hell is Berlusconi at 800 million years old is going to do as part of the Italian government? So it's
some parliamentarian. I don't know, man.
Exactly. So and the quality of life and the the savoir-faire et la joie de vivre in Italy, it disappeared. You go to Rome nowadays, you don't see it anymore. You go to Milan, you see tense people about to fight each other in the streets. That was my last impression when I was in Milano. So it's really terrifying, because the social tissue, it seems to be, it cannot be repaired further. And combine that with mass alienation and zombification, which in the case of Italy sometimes can be even worse than in France or in Germany, and I'm sure even more than in Greece. The Greeks are much more politically aware nowadays, especially than the Italians, for instance. It's mass zombification. It's absolutely terrifying. And on top of it, we have nobody to talk to about. We have one of two of your friends. You can talk to one of two of your friends, and that's it.
Yeah, that's it. Because look, I'll be perfectly frank. What I want to know is, where do we find, the contemporary Paris of the 1920s? The city that is alive intellectually, spiritually, the place that you want to be at. I want to know where that city is. And
for the moment,
Onlineistan, is that
exactly? It's Onlineistan. It's Onlineistan, because sooner or later we figure out that our best interlocutors are all virtual. You almost never meet them, or you meet them once a year in person. So it is on Onlineistan.
That interaction, that face-to-face, skin to skin, is so important.
I agree. No, so completely. Come on, it's the mystery of the agora in democratic Greece, right?
Yeah.
Everybody went to the agora for interaction, or in the Italian piazza. You go to the piazza to talk to people that you know, to your neighbors.
You're talking about debating, the very thing that I feel is dying in the West. We can't do it anymore.
Aristotelian debate. Over. It's over. Exactly.
Chat is saying Moscow, Moscow, Moscow.
I would, if I had to vote, I would have two candidates. Incredibly as it may seem, where I am now, Istanbul, it's one of the candidates.
Yeah, I've been hearing that, by the way. Yeah. I've been hearing that from some friends, that they've been spending a lot of time in Istanbul, that they say it's fantastic. It's very reasonably priced.
You can debate with everybody, Gonzalo, and all of you. The kind of intellectual debate or political debate that you can have here in Istanbul is unimaginable in Europe at the moment. Unimaginable. Out of the question. And the fact that that's even better. You see all those Eurasian cross currents everywhere. You take the metro. That guy's a Uyghur. Oh, that guy's a Kyrgyz. Oh, that one is from Somalia. They're all here,
Okay, Istanbul, and what's the other city?
And my other option would be Moscow, which I'm planning to go and try to spend more time than I usually do when I go. I usually spend 2 or 3 weeks. I would like to go and spend some time in Moscow.
Try and get to St. Petersburg.
And capture the feeling of Moscow now. My last time was 3 years ago. It's too long. It was before COVID, when we could travel, when we still could travel.
Now, one of the things I've noticed about Moscow is that, about Russians generally, not Moscow, is that they seem much more self-confident. There seems, and Mike, of course, you're there, so you could tell me. There's a sense when I talk to people who are from Russia, Russians, that they're more self-confident, they're more sure of themselves, and the kind of bitterness. There was an underlying bitterness that I perceived in a lot of the people, a lot of the Russians that I spoke to, a bitterness of that things just didn't work out for them, and that taste of bitterness, perhaps this is a subjective opinion, but it seems to be mellowing out. Mike, do you agree, or am I talking out of my ass as usual?
No, I agree. I agree mainly. There's one point I'll also make is one big thing is in Russia is, do you read? It's something that as I grew up, reading was a big thing. In Russia, if you say you read a magazine, they won't talk to you. No, you haven't read.
They won't talk to you. You have to
No,
read
you're
books. Exactly.
you're shallow as a puddle. They don't want to know
Exactly.
about Kim Kardashian's ass or whatever is happening. Yeah, you don't have that depth of personality to. Okay, so move on. Then you just mentioned the other thing about self-confident. Russians don't. Okay, but I'm going to just say they don't care what you think. That's not true. They can speak to you and not worry about the consequences of you being offended about it. Like in the West, you say like, oh, actually, I understand why Putin's moved into Ukraine. You won't hear anyone in London dare say that. Actually, from some emails I've received, for literally fear of death. Actually, one guy, he worked in the security services. He said literally, if I were to ever express any sympathies, I am fearful that a bomb would be placed in the baggage that I inspect and it will go boom. This is 1984, like psycho stuff. This is England today, pretty recently. So none of that in Russia. I can say that a man has a penis and a woman has a vagina.
Bigot.
Yeah, that's not up for debate.
Bigot.
And if I were to say anything differently, they would they probably wouldn't talk to me anymore.
They're not mothers. They are birthing people.
Persons or whatever. No, Russians haven't got time for that. And I like Pepe's nomination for Istanbul because Turkey is very popular with Russia. I haven't yet been to Istanbul, but my company's held a few events there, and my understanding is it is a wonderful melting pot of East meets West. And that
a real crossroads. Yeah.
I think it's an important ingredient for this mixing of the minds. People who can still listen to someone they don't agree with. What a skill that is. That seems to be lost.
And the Turks are not only they're extremely polite and they welcome foreigners. They are actually interested in listening to what foreigners have to say, not only about Turkish culture and customs, etc., but in general, politically, geoeconomically, etc.
What about Greece, Alex? Does Greece
what
still
about
have...
Greece? Exactly. I was going to ask about Greece.
It's a military colony now, according to Alex.
Well, yeah, no, you've got a lot of military, U.S. military bases, but the Greeks and the Turks we go back a long ways, but we're very similar in the respect that in Greece we also love to talk politics and we love to engage in debate. Whether you're talking to someone at a restaurant or you're jumping in a taxi, you're always going to get into some sort of conversation with regards to what's happening in the world, what's happening in Greece, what's happening in Ukraine. What do you think of Putin? What do you think of Biden? What did you think of Trump? The Greeks are very politically aware, and the Greeks and the Cypriots, we're in a very unique position right now in that we're one of the few countries that has actually gone through a collapse. I've actually lived it twice. I've been through it twice. I was in Greece in 2009, 2010, when the first collapse happened. And the Greek government announced that we're broke, we have no money, and we're now going to go through a massive austerity. The IMF, the Troika, all of these bureaucrats are going to come in and they're going to set the country straight. They're going to clean the country up. And boy, did they destroy the country. Even to this day, we are still 320 billion in debt. Yeah. Not €1 has come down from that debt that we had in 2000.
It'll never be.
Not one. I've seen thousands and thousands of suicides. I've seen a lot of homeless, something that in Greece you never had. When we were in the drachma, you never saw a Greek living on the street, ever. Never. For Greeks, it was unimaginable. It was unthinkable. Now you see it everywhere. I've seen shops close. I've seen people's futures just get decimated. And then I've been in Cyprus, where I've gone to sleep on a Friday with supposedly you have your money in the bank, and you wake up on a Saturday and you go to the cafe, and this is a true story. You go to the cafe and you're going to get your morning coffee and everyone's talking, everyone's pulling their hair, and some people are in the corner crying, and you're saying, what the hell is going on? Because you haven't, popped open your laptop yet to see what's going on, or you haven't grabbed back then you haven't grabbed a newspaper or something, and the person next to you says, well, you didn't hear, and you're like, what? And they're like, well, the banks, they've been closed down. The one big state bank has been closed down. The money has been taken. That is it. Whatever money you had in this bank is gone. There is no getting it back. Finito,
Wow.
done, vanished. And you see people's lives destroyed literally overnight.
The Russians have been through similar, Alex.
Yeah.
Russians have been through similar.
But you know what? I'm still here, and the Greeks are still here, and the Cypriots are still here, and the Turks are going to still be here, and the Russians are going to be still be here, because there is this long-term thinking. We are living in the short term, and with technology, it seems that we're living, by the second.
Micro term, yeah.
The micro term, but there's this long-term thinking to civilizations like Greece, like Russia, like Iran, like India. And I think a lot of the collective West, like Italy, but a lot of the collective West has kind of forgotten about that. And I just go back to saying a lot's going to change when things really collapse. When the S hits the fan, a lot of things are going to change for a lot of people. And I think we're going to see a lot of this wokeness kind of melt away.
I hope you're right.
Yeah, and I don't want to discount the U.S. because for a place which is the center of wokeness, there are also a lot of Americans. I would say it's the majority of Americans that are fighting back, and there are businesses fighting back, there are people fighting back, and I don't think they're going to let their civilization just go down the crapper with this wokeness either. It's just something that we're going to have to fight through it. And I've been through it twice, and I'm going to probably go through it a third time.
Yes, I think we're all going to go through it again. And with that, unfortunately, gentlemen, I'm going to have to call it a stream because I unfortunately have to go, because I'd love to go another hour or 2 or 3 of this conversation. It's fascinating. And the 3 of you gentlemen, it's been a pleasure having you on. Before I go, I want to know if you would have some final words that you want to leave with our audience. Who would like to go first? If you have something on your mind that you want to pass on before we go. Mike?
Pepe?
I
was going to say, should we hand over to Pepe? We haven't heard from you in a bit.
Oof.
I'll go first because as the host, I'll sign off at the end.
Go ahead.
My thinking is that this is going to be a very, very rough fall and winter. And I think that the winter of 2022 to 2023 will be one for the history books. I think that in Germany and in the Netherlands and in other places, people will go hungry and people will go cold. And it will be a misery that Europe has not experienced since 1946. And I think that this will be a disaster, but paradoxically, and this is my hope at least, that going through this misery might wind up being one of the best things to happen to Europe, because it will get Europe to grow up, to realize that its funds are not limitless, that it cannot afford to have this pathetic bureaucracy in Brussels, and that it has to, as they say, straighten up and fly right. Because one of the things that I noticed living in Europe, I was in 2017 and 18, I was living in London, and 2019 through 2021, I was living in Amsterdam. And one of the things I noticed was that the Europeans thought that their richness, the wealth of their continent was limitless. And they're going to be crashing into limits. And that, I think, is always a good thing. Because as Alex pointed out, that he's gone through 2 crises, but these crises make you stronger. The whole notion of anti-fragility, the more stress on a system, the stronger it becomes. And my hope is that Europe will not crumble and collapse, but rather go through this and grow strength through the difficulties. That at least is my hope. But I do believe that to get to that place, it's going to be a lot of suffering. And so for the audience who are Europeans and Americans as well, you better get ready because it's going to be a bumpy ride. Mike, you have something you want to say?
Yeah, I agree with you completely. And I'm often left wondering about my family back home in the UK. I often check in with them. How are you doing? Like with the cost of living, and I'm even when I was covering news about Poland and the price of coal, you think pensioners, fixed incomes. The people who shouldn't suffer, I feel, are going to be some among the first to suffer. And as we've alluded to, Pepe talked about, Brussels. These human lives are just digits. They are wasteful mouths. They are inconveniences, and these bureaucrats, they don't care about them. So that is it's going to be painful both for those in those countries and for people like myself who have to look from the outside in. So I hope we're wrong, of course, but I agree with you, Gonzalo. You said about these crises come out stronger. Look at Russia. Remember the West at the beginning when the sanctions hit and the ruble skyrocketed? The West loved to post those pictures of people in lines withdrawing cash. My first question, why didn't that cause a run on the bank? The answer is because the Russians adjusted their banking system. Their reserve, they do use fractional reserve banking, but they've upped and upped and upped the reserves. So they've learned from the previous runs and stuff. Northern Rock in England just collapsed like a deck of cards back in 2008 because they haven't had these problems like Alex described. No one really can remember that certainly not in the UK of those hardships. Yeah. So there's that. It's a bit cliche now. I've seen it so much, but is it tough times breed tough men?
Yeah, exactly. And Pepe, I'll give you the final word because unfortunately I do have to go because I have an appointment.
Oh, sorry, Alex.
No, Pepe, what would you like to say?
Okay, very quickly. Okay, this is basically for Westerners, which I suppose 99% of our audience are Westerners. If we could manage inside ourselves a sort of crossover between Heraclitus, everything flows, the Buddha, everything is impermanent, and the Tao, you have to search for the way, for your inner equilibrium, we all would be whole. The problem is most of us in the West, we don't know Buddhism, we don't know Taoism, and we forgot about Heraclitus. So it's going to be a very, very rough ride.
Yes, I think so. Alex?
Real quick. In Greece, we have a saying: with each door that closes, another door opens. So, and that is a Greek saying and words to live by. So when things are closing, remember to always look for that open door. It's there somewhere.
Yeah. And so with that, everybody, gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me. It's been a real
guys.
pleasure.
Thanks, everybody.
Chat, thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed the show. And I will catch you next time on Tuesday. There's going to be another roundtable, of course. And my guests are going to be Ray McGovern, Larry Johnson, and Theodore Postol. We're going to be discussing nuclear proliferation treaties and how they were rescinded. And because of it, why we are closer now to a nuclear war than we've been since the Cuban Missile Crisis. I think it's going to be a very, very interesting conversation. I hope you'll stay tuned for it. It'll be this Tuesday. And so until then, take it easy.